There's a lot of questions to ask coming into the NBA season. Which team's going to win the title? Which player's going to win MVP? But really, we can't answer those questions just yet. In this video, though, we're going to go into the biggest questions that are actually coming up with lots of answers. What'll happen with the Nets? The Nets are the favorites to win the Eastern Conference. And that's not just the Nets fans' perspective, but the ones that was accepted around the league coming into the season. Since that point, the Nets have only become a bigger favorite as they have added to the talent on the roster and made the biggest trade of the season so far. And as we probably won't get another trade bigger than this one in 2021. The trade is of course the one that ended up bringing James Harden to the team in order to join Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, which was already the best dynamic duo in the Eastern Conference even before Durant came back from his injury and played his first game with Irving. But as you might know by now, that despite all of this, Brooklyn isn't the top-ranked team in the conference. If there was going to be a season where you would expect the kind of dominance you saw from the Lakers last season, or from the Warriors when they were a dynasty, it would be this season. And so far, we haven't seen that despite their spot at number 3. Now, that's not to say that they've not been good, but the Eastern Conference is far from being in the bag for them at this point. Kyrie Irving did miss 7 games earlier in the year, and no, it wasn't because of injury, but rather because of personal reasons. He ended up being fined $50,000 and was made to forfeit some of his salary because of it, and of course the story made waves around the league, with Kyrie being the key point guard on what is supposed to be a team that will be running to the finals easily. And Kevin Durant is playing well right now and is one of the best scorers in the league, with 30 points per game so far. But we don't really know how that's going to work out in the long run once James Harden hits the court with him. It doesn't always work out in real life like it should on paper, and we won't know how the Harden trade's really going to work out until we see him play a couple more games with the Nets. It looks so far like Harden is working on building some chemistry with Irving and Durant, which is a good sign, but we also can't just ignore the big problems that Harden had in Houston. He was one of the main factors responsible for running Russell Westbrook out of town, if not the main one, and he still ended up disagreeing with teammates and leaving the Rockets even after getting his preferred point guard John Wall. If Harden puts in the same effort off the court with the Nets that he also did with the Rockets, and ends up getting called out for it by some of his veteran teammates, he is going to have the same negative reaction. We can't say just yet whether or not that'll happen because it hasn't been long since the deal and Harden's played less than a dozen games for the Nets at this point. However, this question will be cleared up sooner or later, and at the very least, we'll find out when the teams head to the playoffs and has to play in games that mean something more than just seeding. We have seen some pretty good teams get taken out by underdogs when their stars aren't firing on all cylinders, and that could happen to the Nets if they aren't careful. After all, the Nuggets did manage to upset the Clippers last year, and the Nets are a team that has even less experience dealing with playoff series compared to the Clippers, who've had a number of trips to the postseason over the last decade. Ultimately, this one might be the biggest question in the Eastern Conference. The Nets can definitely get to the finals if they play to their full potential, but if they don't, we'll be seeing a surprise team in the finals facing the Western Conference winner. Will Bradley Beal get traded? The Washington Wizards are not in the spot that they want to be right now, and this is coming off the big trade that should have improved things for them. They sent John Wall to the Rockets and got back Russell Westbrook in return, and it looked like they were going to enter a new era and maybe do something different. Sometimes you have to change your star players in order to get somewhere after all. DeMar DeRozan, for example, was a star in Toronto before being traded to the Spurs for Kawhi Leonard, and the Raptors ended up winning the title on the back of that trade of Leonard's impact on the team. However, the Wizards trading their own star player for another star is looking like a step backwards so far and not a step forwards. The Wizards have the worst record in the Eastern Conference and the second worst record in the NBA in general right now. They're a really bad team, with only the Timberwolves being worse, even if Westbrook and their other star player Bradley Beal have put on some entertaining performances during these games. They honestly just do not have the talent to put around these two stars to let them actually flourish. And Westbrook isn't having the best season, even if he is playing well so far. His points per game has dropped somewhat, and he's been a good but not dominant player for the Wizards, at a time when the Wizards need someone who can perform the way that he did back in Oklahoma City after Kevin Durant left. Those teams were clearly Westbrook's teams, and he was their dominant player. But right now, it looks like this is Beal's team based on his bigger contribution, with 34 points per game and the most minutes played on the roster. Beal is really only one that's acting like a superstar for the Wizards right now. Some of the other names around him are Rui Hachimura, Thomas Bryant, and Davis Bertans. But these players aren't just enough to win with. Even if Beal is a better scorer than Stephen Curry or Kevin Durant, or really any of the NBA's other top shooters right now, he's the top scoring player in the league at this point in the season, even ahead of Durant, as well as Damian Lillard, who falls into the number 3 spot. So it's not crazy to think that Beal might be interested in a trade. After all, his best season is being wasted on a team that isn't going to make it to the playoffs at this rate. But it has been reported that Beal isn't interested in a move away from Washington, as much as this would shake things up around the league, and maybe even allow him to contend for a title if he ended up in the right destination. Beal moving teams could even see us get a real contender to the Nets and the Lakers for the title. Despite all of that, it looks like Beal is comfortable in Washington, at least for now. He reportedly said that he doesn't want to trade. The Athletic even stated that he both hasn't requested one and that the Wizards have made no intention of trading him. Of course, these things are subject to change, and most of the time, players won't just confirm trade rumors because it would create controversy while they're still in their current city. Even James Harden seemed to act like he wasn't interested in a trade until later on, when it became obvious that he was going to make a move. But based upon what we're seeing so far with the Wizards, things haven't gotten bad enough for either Beal or the team to think about it. And that's not to say that there are hidden trade plans and that we'll see Beal dealt this season for sure, despite the apparent lack of interest right now. He spent his whole career with the Wizards, and even if they aren't a winning team, there is still a chance that Beal just prefers to stay in the same city. Now, this doesn't mean fans of other teams won't keep an eye on the situation, though, wanting to see if things change. Is this the year for the Nuggets? There is a lot of talk about the contenders in the league right now, the Lakers and the Clippers as well as the Nets. But there might be another team in the mix that we're talking about a lot less compared to those more well-known contenders. And that team is the Denver Nuggets. They showed that they are for real when they beat the Clippers in a playoff series last season, and they also have a knack for finding some of the best young talent in the league and utilizing it well. They also happen to have a very unique player that's in the MVP race right now, Nikola Jokic. It's a name that many didn't expect to hear in the race for the MVP, but his numbers so far this year show that he's doing something else that, well, really no other center in the league can. His passing ability is off the charts for the position, and he's throwing around more assists per game than many point guards, while also putting up a respectable number of points each time. Jokic has sort of been the face of the Nuggets and their young core since coming into the league, but this season might be the one where he steps up to be a mainstream superstar. The main question right now is whether or not the Nuggets have enough other talents to be able to take out some of the top teams that they could face if they end up in the playoffs. The Clippers are going to be more aware of them this season, and everyone else is too. Jokic has already gotten 47 points per game this season, and at this point, all we know is that he's for real. But the teams that are seriously contending for the title have more than just one star option to go to. The Lakers have Anthony Davis playing next to LeBron James, and the Clippers have Kawhi Leonard playing with Paul George. Within the Eastern Conference, the Nets have a big three. We saw the Miami Heat fall in the finals last season when their efforts ended up coming down to one player, Jimmy Butler, leading them against the depth of the Lakers. The Nuggets can't fall into the same trap if they want to be more than just the archetypal good young team. They also need others playing just as well as Jokic is.